The first topic of the presentation is Unpacking Islamic Finance and Energy Justice in Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and the United Arab Emirates, Complementary or Opposing Principles. And that will be presented by Halima and Hussein, Ph.D., representing University of Pau, France. Are you ready? I can just give you the microphone. Yes, please. You can just hold it. Yes, or it will be more convenient to you. Yes.
Thank you.
So just because it's my let's say such observation and comment that we are just let's say following the flexible attitude to time. Yes. Cultural, flexible attitude to time. It's for sure not linear. Yes, let's stay by that option. But let's say, I'm asking you very much for just time discipline. 15 minutes, they belong to you. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Halima Hussein. I'm a PhD researcher at the University of Pau in France. I'm originally from Kenya. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I did my LLB degree, my bachelor's degree in Kenya, and my master's degree in energy and natural resources law at Queen Mary, University of London in the UK. And my PhD looks at energy trade and the injustices in energy trade. Today, however, I'm going to discuss about something completely different, challenging myself, and I'll be talking about Islamic finance and energy justice in these three countries, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and the United Arab Emirates, and whether they are complementary or opposing principles. So my presentation structure is what I have just presented there. I will introduce the topic. I will then talk about Islamic finance briefly, and then I will do a brief literature review of this topic. I will then unpack the theory of my presentation, which is energy justice, and introducing a new theory, Islamic climate finance. I will then talk about the method I'm using to interrogate this subject, and thereafter I'll dive into my three case studies, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Malaysia. I will provide brief findings and finally conclude. Okay, so we need to know the background and the context to this presentation. We're living in a world where we know that renewables need to increase from 3% to 31% by 2050. We need to decline fossil fuel consumption from the current 80% to 33% by 2050 in order to meet our international targets under the Paris Agreement. We also know that these current targets are also very insufficient. We need to cut our current greenhouse gas emissions by 43% by 2030. Moreover, we have a huge funding gap. We have a 25 trillion funding gap as per the S&P Global. And we have a very recent report by the UN, UNEP, released the Adaptation Funding Gap 2025 very recently, and it found that we need 310 to 365 billion per year for developing countries by 2035. We also know that energy transition is largely driven by government policy and regulation, as opposed to the private sector. But the private sector is doing something. We know that we have multilateral development banks, development finance institutions, and MDBs are engaging in climate financing. The World Bank Group actually delivered 44% of their entire total financing towards climate financing, which is laudable. However, it is not enough, which is why I'm talking about this subject. We need more money, we need more climate finance, and it may not necessarily be from the World Bank Group, so where else can we get these funds? we need to remind ourselves of our current economic order, current economic standing. We are largely driven by Adam Smith economics, whereby he said this in his Wealth of Nations book in 1776, that we should actually be looking towards self-interest to engage people, that we should never talk to them about what is good, what is greater for the larger community. It should be their own advantages in order to attract these people. And today I'm going to introduce a new way of thinking, that actually it should not be a profit-driven economy. It should not be specifically targeting individual interests for the common good. No, it should at its base be for the common good. And this is exactly what Islamic finance talks about. It focuses on profit, not interest. Interest is prohibited in Islamic finance. It focuses on risk sharing and profit and loss sharing. What Professor Heffron discussed earlier this morning, risk, reward, responsibility. It talks about sharing these responsibilities. It prohibits speculation, speculative transactions based on future, future events. It mandates that investments need to be ethical. You cannot invest in some industries that are prohibited, such as gambling and alcohol. It also talks about the prohibition of unjust enrichment, that there should be fairness and balance in your transactions that prevent one party unjustly enriching themselves against the interests of the other party, and that it also inherently does not believe that money has value. Money is a means of exchange, and that money has to be backed by an asset, and that is how you make profit, not purely through money. And it also mandates social responsibility and charity, what they call zakat, which is mandatory charity, 2.5% of annual wealth for those people who are eligible. And finally, that you need to be transparent and disclose everything in every single transaction that you undertake. So essentially, it's about justice and partnership, very familiar principles to us. And on the right is actually the first bank, Islamic Finance Bank. It was established in 1964 in Egypt. It closed down after 6 years. But not because it was not profitable. It was very publicly accepted. It was closed down due to the prevailing politics, and it was taken over by banks that were then supported by the government. So where is Islamic finance? Majority of Islamic finance is in Islamic banking, 70%. Sukuk, we have about 18% in sukuk. Sukuk means bonds. We have Islamic funds, which are mutual funds, 6%. We have other funds, 4%, and we have takaful, which is actually their insurance, the Islamic version of insurance, 2%. So what are people saying about Islamic finance and climate finance? And this is exactly the emerging literature that I have discovered. Most of it is very recent. So the first is this initiative, Islamic Sustainable Finance Initiative 2025. It emanated from this pledge by the UAE Banks Federations of 1 trillion dirham by 2030. And we have very innovative, we have private sector, we have regulators, and we also have civil society in this initiative, which is laudable. The other literature discusses, and we have a lot of policy papers from the UN primarily. We also have OECD providing policy papers on how we can actually channel Islamic finance into SDGs and climate action, reminding Islamic finance-rich countries that actually of 1.7 billion people, 21% actually live below the poverty line, double the worldwide figure. Why isn't it going towards helping these people that are part of that community? And the third emerging literature is a lot of work is going into sukuk. the green bonds, the 18% that I actually identified earlier, and we have the London Stock Exchange, the International Capital Market Association, Islamic Development Bank, and we also have a lot of think tanks. McKinsey is in it, PwC.
5 minutes.
Quite in case,
yes.
okay. And we also have very new literature that has been published on this topic this month, and one coming up next month. So energy justice and Islamic finance. The Asian Development Bank came up with this, trying to bring in, how does Islamic finance and Islamic principles marry together with our current climate crisis. And if you look at the principles and what we're talking about in energy justice, they're literally the same. We're talking about justice, equity, fairness, accountability, vicegerency or environmental stewardship, compassion for people. These are the very principles that we talk about in energy justice. In terms of the method, I used the doctrinal and case study method. If you look at the top countries that have the most Islamic finance assets, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, UAE, I picked the top 4. Unfortunately, I could not find data from Iran, so I picked the top 3, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, and UAE. In terms of Saudi Arabia, I'll just speak about this. A lot of strategy, a lot of policy on what they intend to do with respect to renewables, with respect to cutting down emissions, even coming up with very large solar power projects. But there's a very big gap between their ambition and their implementation. Actually, 2% is renewables. That they do, besides consuming a lot of fossil fuels, they also export a lot of fossil fuels, leading to a lot of cosmopolitan injustices, distributive injustices. So they have a lot of Islamic finance, they have a lot of supposed climate finance and climate strategies, but their actions and what they're talking about and what they have does not marry with each other. If you look at the climate, thank you. If you look at the latest climate action tracker, their standing is critically insufficient. United Arab Emirates, if you look at their strategy, very big on sukuk, very big on bonds. They're the leaders in this field, essentially. But when you look at what they're actually doing, look, just 2 years ago, they awarded contracts worth 17B for their offshore gas fields. What they're saying and what is actually, what is happening does not marry with each other. Despite all those assets, I mentioned 70% in Islamic banking, look at what they're focusing on, 16%. It doesn't make sense. Their narrative and what is happening on the ground, does not marry with climate. Islamic climate finance does not marry with energy justice. Finally, Malaysia, very big on forest governance, dishing out carbon credits left, right, and center. 50% of Malaysia is essentially forest, which is very laudable. But if you look at what they're doing, also focusing a lot on carbon credits, on sukuk, on bonds, but very reliant on fossil fuels, does not marry with energy justice as well as Islamic climate finance, where they are a leader. So essentially, it's about implementation, not new pledges. We need to implement what we are saying. That's what Islamic climate finance is about. We need to disseminate this knowledge. Zakat, which is charity, is mandatory according to these principles. 2.5% of annual wealth every year. Where is it going? There's already public acceptance of donation, of common goodwill. Why aren't we doing that? And targeted action. Why are we talking about sukuk, mutual funds, assets, takaful, instead of the 70% in Islamic banking? Why aren't we focusing on that? And for the rest of the world, it's focused a lot in the GCC region, Gulf Arab states, but Europe is taking up, the UK is doing a lot on these. I mean, the rest of Europe can pick up and take these lessons and run with it. To conclude, they're not opposing principles. They're actually they go well together, and we should be speaking about these. We need to direct these funds away from fossil fuels. It's about telling these countries reminding them, even in a friendly way, this is what you're talking about, why aren't you doing it? And finally, it's more than a financial opportunity, it's an ethical, social, we have ethical, social imperatives through Islamic climate finance to boost up climate finance that we need. I'll conclude there. My latest research is one that we wrote with my supervisor, Professor Heffron, as well as Diane Krall from Australia. You can have a look at it. It's about energy policy distractions, that some of the distractions I might have mentioned today, to renewable energy programs, a comparative assessment, and 2 upcoming literature in energy policy journal, as well as a book chapter. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's really very interesting topic.